Hey guys, Ike here from Mike'sOutdoors.com. Here today to talk to you about why deer sometimes seem to disappear and what you can do to find them. Okay, so I think we've all had this happen to us. We have a spot that is just loaded with deer. The deer are coming by it every day and they seem to all of a sudden just disappear. We go back to the stand a few times here and there and we are not seeing anything. It just happens. It seems to happen every year to some people. Now there's some things you can do to anticipate this, and there's some things you can do to react to this. But we're going to talk about deer behavior and why this happens first. There's three things that motivate a deer. The same things that pretty much motivate most men out there. And those three things are shelter, sex, and food. The primary one and the most important one of all those things is food. Shelter in this scenario is a bedding area, and most deer will have a couple of primary bedding areas and a few secondary bedding areas. They've got bedding areas that they're going to go to every day, you know, and they got bedding area that the only time they're going to leave those bedding areas is if they're flushed out of those bedding areas or something runs them out of their bedding area or keeps them from going there. And in that case, they'll go to a secondary bedding area or a backup bedding area at that point. So that is something that motivates them, is to get to a bedding area. The second thing that motivates most deer is sex, and that only happens in a very small window of time. Usually in late October, early November, we get into the pre-rut, and then we get into the rut stage. So there, for about a month, the deer, especially the bucks, almost always, it's just the bucks, are motivated by sex. And on rare occasions, you may get a doe who is not bred, and she will go seek out one of those bucks. But 9 times out of 10, it probably more than that, 9.9 times out of 10, it's the bucks who are seeking the doe. So it's the bucks who are motivated by sex. But every deer, all year long, we put a hashtag or asterisks beside this long, are motivated by their stomach. The only time a deer is not motivated by his stomach or her stomach is during the rut. During the rut, a lot of bucks will abstain from eating, and they will only chase, and they will only be thinking about sex. That is the one exception to the food is the ultimate motivator rule. Again, this is a very small window of time. Now, while those bucks are motivated by sex during that time, the does are still motivated by food. So food is still your primary objective. Deer are motivated by that food all year long, every day. They have to get up. The only reason they get up out of their bedding area is to go and find that food. That is their primary motivation in life, and this covers all animals out there. All animals are going to be motivated by food. So when those deer seem to disappear, it's 9 times out of 10 it is because their food source has changed. And now this can be the same when it comes to crops or places that have a lot of agriculture, or places like what I hunt where it's all acorn trees. So as a Midwest hunter, we have to be mobile, and we have to be willing to and able to move. So you can do that with either having your stand set up in preparation for this, which I have some stands that are set up, you know, as close as 75 yards from another stand. And some of these stands I'll hunt year round. Some stands will get hunted a lot, and I have some stands that may only get hunted for a couple weeks, if that. Once the food source in that area is gone, the deer are no longer there, and I won't hunt that stand again throughout the year. So preparation is key to this. But if you're not prepared for this, or something gets thrown, you get thrown a loop, you can always go with a more mobile setup as well, as far as like climbing stands are what we use around here. But you can also set up ground blinds in season. I don't care to do that because it seems like the deer around here, if you pop up a ground blind in the middle of season, the deer seem to know it's not right, and they seem to avoid coming close to it. So I don't like to use blinds in that situation, but maybe you guys can. The other thing is a nice mobile hang-on stand with a nice light set of sticks. I have that as well. And you also can get into the saddle setups. I have a saddle as well. So I don't like to hunt out of it, and I don't use it very often. But the key is to be light and be mobile and to be willing to move to these areas where the deer are now feeding. So that is one way to do it, is basically just to move with the deer, either in preparation or with a lightweight mobile setup that you can use and be versatile in that way. Basically adapt and overcome. And this is going to happen no matter what. The food sources of every deer out there are going to eventually disappear, even if you're hunting croplands. So the best thing to do actually is to be prepared and to have knowledge about that food source and when it's going to be good, when it's going to be bad, when it's going to go away, and what the alternate food sources are. So if you're hunting over cropland, are you do the deer prefer it at certain times of year? Do they prefer it during certain stages of growth? When is the hunter going to harvest that? There's usually going to be some left on the ground. So where, walk out in the fields and find where that extras is left over. After the deer exhausts that crop field, are there acorn trees in your area? What kind of acorn trees are there? What other food sources are there for the deer to go to after that? So you're prepared for when that transition happens. It happened on a property that I hunted a few years ago. I came up there one day, combines were rolling through the field, and as they were rolling through the field, I thought, well, I went home that day, but as they were rolling through the field the next weekend, I came out and I didn't hunt that field anymore. I hunted a corner of that field where I noticed they were loading up the trucks. As they were combining and the trucks were parking there, they were spilling grain right there. So I hunted the corner of that field and actually harvested a doe coming out to feed on the beans that they had spilled when they were loading up the trucks. So things like that. And then as that kind of area dried up, I went back into hunting the trees and hunting where the deer were getting in on the acorns. So the other thing for like Midwest hunters like myself are going to be the acorn trees. The acorn trees, you have a vast forest full of acorn trees, and there's some things you can do to kind of anticipate what is going to be dropping and when. And that's a lot of guesswork, but having knowledge of the trees and of the kind of trees you have in your area and how much rain you got that year, it is going to give you an idea of what trees are going to be dropping and what trees are going to be dropping when. The other thing is knowing which trees the deer seem to prefer. Some acorns out there are sweeter than others. I know white oaks, if I see a white oak tree, I put a stand close to it, and when the acorns start dropping, I get in the stand that's close to or in that white oak tree, because that is where the deer are going to be. They prefer white oaks over the reds. The other thing is knowing where your delicacies are in your hunting land. And by delicacies, I'm talking about things like persimmons, things like cherry trees, and things that deer really seem to prefer, honeysuckle and things like that. We had one place that had pawpaws on it, and the deer would be just eating those pawpaws like crazy when they were ready to go. So knowing where the delicacies are in your hunting area and knowing when those are ready to go. If you've ever bitten to a persimmon that's not ripe yet, you know those things will make you pucker. They are sour as can be. So knowing when those persimmons are going to be ready, get over there and hunt by those things. Apple trees, knowing when deer are going to be hitting those apple trees is a good way to know, okay, I'm not going to be in the acorns today. I'm going to go over and hunt this persimmon tree or this honeysuckle stand or this, one of the properties I hunted had cherry trees on it and deer were just all over it. So knowing where the food sources are going to be when they're going to be ready can help you plan your hunt and know when to be in the tree stand over that particular area. So what it comes down to basically is knowing your food sources and knowing when and where they're going to be ready, and knowing what stand. That'll help you to be prepared for knowing what stand you need to be in. When it comes down to it, you can go to the internet. You can go to your local ag extension office. We have one right here in Carthage that is the MU extension office. Lots of great resources as far as what native plants we have and what animals use those native plants and things like that. So you can find information like that. You can find information on the internet. Google is your friend. But when it comes right down to it, every place is a little bit different and every deer is a little bit different. So the painful lesson of watch and observe is the best way to do it. Sometimes you just have to get out in the field. You can make all the best plans, and you can go into it with all the knowledge that you have equipped, and you can go in there and you could be wrong. I wouldn't say 90% of the time, but 75% of the time that happens to me. I think, oh, I've got this all worked out, I know exactly what's going on, and I go in there and the deer aren't there. So sometimes you just got to be lucky, but go in and make those observations. You know, when you go in and you sit in that stand and you don't see any deer, the deer seem to disappear. Look around you and see, is there a food source here? What is that food source? You know, there's not a food source here, so where could they have moved to, and what food source are they now going to? Are the persimmon? I'm over here in the acorn trees. Maybe the persimmons are ripe, so maybe they're over in the persimmon patch or the apple stand or wherever they're at. So you have to kind of take that into account of what they're eating and when they're going to be eating it. If you're prepared and you know, hey, those persimmons are ready, you can be over there and you can be in those persimmons and you can be on them and the deer come underneath you and hopefully you get a shot. So that is all part of it, being prepared and moving with the food sources. Deer are ruled by their stomachs, and their food sources are going to constantly change. So when it appears that the deer in your area have just disappeared and are no longer in front of your stands, you have to be moving. And the best way to move, instead of just shooting in the dark and just going out blindly, is to look at the food sources and move to where you think the new food source is for that deer. Okay, so that's about it. Like I said, deer are motivated by those three things: food, sex, and shelter. We know the shelter, or you should know where the shelter is. That's their bedding area. Sex is a limited window and during the rut, and can really be hectic if you try to hunt a buck during the rut and try to chase him around. It can be hectic. The main motivator for deer is food. Food is going to rule their life, and it's going to motivate them to get up and go to a certain spot and be in that certain spot. And the best way to be in that spot is to have the knowledge of the food, have the knowledge of your area, have the knowledge of your deer herd, when that food source is ready to go, and when you need to be there, what wind is going to be right and what time you need to be there. If you're armed with that knowledge when you head into the woods next time, you will probably be a successful hunter overall. This is what I base most of my hunting tactics on, is the food source, and it has led me to a lot of success in the deer woods. And if you do the same thing, I believe it can help you become a more successful hunter and become more consistent in filling your tags. So I hope this helped you guys, and I hope that this helps you put a deer in the freezer or maybe a buck on the wall. So I appreciate you guys watching this. You can follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook under IkesOutdoors.com. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and share these videos. Really appreciate you guys watching, and appreciate you guys hitting that like, subscribe, and share button. So until next time, appreciate it, and we will see you then.